in the early days. The ultimate goal for any company when you're working with their partner team is I want your salespeople to be incentivized to sell my stuff. So once we had this reseller agreement, that was a big part of the negotiations was like, we need to be part of your sales compensation tools. Like, how can you incentivize your salespeople to sell our stuff so we both make a lot of money?
Yeah. In this episode, I am joined by Jonathan Chizick, CEO and co-founder at SmartPath. They are building tools to help parents research and navigate the home education journey for their children. A seasoned entrepreneur, marketer, and startup advisor with a track record of scaling high growth companies and securing transformative partnerships. Hi, Jonathan. It's great to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
We met at Austin at South by Southwest at one of the side events that was hosted by Antler. And it's funny,
Yeah, that's right.
every other conference I've gone to, I have met an Antler founder, just happened to be in the room. I was in Helsinki last week. I met another Antler founder who's just graduated from Antler Helsinki. So it's a small world. It was nice running into you.
Yeah, yeah, it was. That was a pretty well attended event. So,
Oh yeah,
and
it was crowded, wasn't it?
yeah,
Secret Garden, yeah. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about SmartPath and who your customers are and what do you guys do?
yeah, sure. SmartPath, we actually got started as part of Antler in the Austin cohort this spring. We're building tools and services to help parents navigate the homeschool journey for their kids, starting with an AI powered curriculum matcher that helps parents quickly sort through thousands of options that are out there to find the ones that might work best for their child and for their family. And then building on that, we'll be building out some marketplaces to connect those homeschool families with the services that they're looking for as part of that experience, whether that's homeschool advising, college coaching, tutoring, or extracurricular activities.
Hmm. How challenging is homeschooling in general and how big is the market?
Your second question, how big is the market? That is one of the things we learned is that there's not like definitive data in this space.
Hmm.
You can you look at the Department of Education or the Census Bureau or these different homeschool groups have done different research and you have numbers that are all over the place. Best numbers we see right now, it's about 6 million kids in the US. It's still growing about 10% year over year. There was a big spike during the pandemic, but it did not drop back to pre-pandemic levels. It's continued to grow, just not as quickly as it did during 2020, 2021. So pretty big market. As far as the challenging, so that's the primary use case we're going after. My wife and I, we went through the process of moving our kids from public school eventually into homeschooling. And through that process, like initially we're like, we know we need a different experience.
Mhm.
I have heard homeschooling has changed. Our frame of reference for what it was 30 years old from when we were in high school, and a lot's changed in 30 years. And the more we dug into it, the more we realized, wow, there's so much has changed, so much different, but it's so overwhelming because it's a really important decision.
Yep.
And two, there's so many more options. Do we find a local micro school? Do we have to do the teaching by ourselves? Are there local co-ops? Do we need to have a tutor? Is this going to screw up our college readiness for the kids? Like all these questions start coming to mind.
Mhm.
And there wasn't a great way to answer those other than spending hours researching that online, joining Facebook groups where there's a lot of very large Facebook groups for homeschoolers, asking questions of strangers, meeting friends who know somebody who's homeschooling, talking to them. So a lot of research time to try to figure out what the different options are and what you're even allowed to do, and then what might work best for you. So as the genesis of the idea for SmartPath is, I'm pretty sure we're not the only people who've gone through this.
Yep.
And sure enough, we talked to hundreds of homeschool parents, and it was a pretty similar story. One is I need the different experience, but there's no easy way to sort through this research process and make it easier. So that's what we started off building, is looking at some of what AI is really good at today is helping with that initial research process of you can ask ChatGPT a question, give me 10 ideas for this blog post, right? We're taking it a step further and saying, hey, what if we gave you Ask all of the required criteria or recommended criteria that you're looking for in this homeschool experience. So one, we need to know, like, how old is your child? What sort of grade level would you say that they were at? Are there cost constraints? Do you need hybrid, online, or in person? Do you want faith-based or non-faith-based, or does it not matter? Like, all these different questions that you as the parent would be looking for when you're doing all this research. If we provide that into AI can come back with a curated list instead of you having to sort through hundreds of options to try to figure out, oh, wait, no, this one is only online. I don't want that. Now I need to go to the next one. AI does that pretty rapidly. So it can sort those hundreds down to a couple options for some math for your 12-year-old. Here's two options for online. Here's an option that's in person, that's through a co-op that's actually 10 minutes away from where you live. Right, now you can spend that research time maybe talking to people at that school or finding other students who've gone through that instead of spending a whole lot of time on this upfront research. So that's initially where we came from with SmartPath, was trying to help parents with that initial pain point. Mm-hmm. Then as we got more into it, realized like it's not a one-time thing. Like, one, you continue to do this as the child gets older and advances in their education, but also, similar to in a public school, it's not just about the academics. Like, there's extracurriculars, there's college prep. You might need tutoring to help with the academics. The homeschool families are looking for those same sorts of services, and it's not necessarily the same ones that you would have as part of the public school experience. So different markets have evolved around tutoring specializing in homeschooling, college coaches specializing in homeschooling, extracurriculars that specialize in homeschool kids. Because, one, take the extracurricular example, the karate dojo can offer homeschool classes at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, right, when most kids are in school. But homeschool has so much flexibility, they might be able to offer a class, right? But how do they find those students in the area, right? So now it starts to open up opportunities where, once we know this information about these homeschool families, the experience they're looking for, we can help curate matches to service providers that provide those different services. So it suddenly becomes something that's not just at the beginning when they're trying to learn how do I get started with this homeschooling thing? I'm pretty sure this is what I want to do, but how do I even do it? Like, then once they're in it, it's okay. Now there's other things that you're going to need, and we're going to be able to help match you with the right ones for the rest of that experience.
It's obviously a journey. Is there a community aspect to it? Are you trying to build a community around this as well for local chapters?
TBD. So there's absolutely a community aspect to it. Yeah. It's, do we want to own that community or not, or just leverage existing communities? That's something that we need to figure out. We got some hypotheses around it, but just taking a look at the size of homeschool Facebook groups, is absolutely a community aspect to it. It's one of the first places that people who get into homeschooling, like, they join these Facebook groups. Yeah. There's potentially an opportunity there because there's a lot of things missing from that experience that Facebook groups can't offer, but there's not necessarily a good alternative to it now. So potentially something to look at in the future.
Right. And so you've been at it for 7 months, a year. How long has it been?
Oh, yeah, since May. Oh, so what's that? 6 months?
6 years in founder time.
Yeah.
You started with Antler, and the early growth has been powered by the founding team, and you mentioned you hired a bunch of interns. Do you want to talk about what led to the decision? A lot of people stay away from interns at the early stage. Few people do hire interns. What would be your recommendation?
It was, one, out of necessity. We were bootstrapping. We still are bootstrapping. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of cash flying around. So we're looking for help. So that was, you find interns who are willing to work for the experience. Yep. That certainly helps with the lack of cash flow. So that kind of drove us to look at how we could find interns. I was pleasantly surprised by the number and quality of folks that we've been able to find through that process. I don't know if that's due to the economy or changes in the entry level job market these days, maybe, but finding a lot of like very recent grads or college students who have some relevant experience who are very interested in working on projects just for the experience.
At Antler, I've seen and met a lot of folks who've been around the block, helped grow a few startups, uh, and then eventually took the leap of actually starting a company. Before this, you spent a lot of time advising startups as well. Has that come in handy? What are some of the advice that you gave others that you don't take yourself or take?
The advising is the easier part. It's usually easier to see things when you're not in the weeds with it. And as an advisor, you're not as personally impacted by the decisions. You can take a little bit more of a neutral approach to it, or neutral view, and maybe point out some things that in a lot of cases I've found it's not that the founders are necessarily missing these things. It's more of they have so many things going on that they're not maybe sure of, do I go all in on this one ICP or do I continue to work on these two different ICPs? I'm not really sure. So having that kind of independent view to help them make that decision is important. So, and on the flip side, I see myself asking those same questions like that. I know if I was advising myself, I would probably say to do this, but I don't know. I just can't really pull the trigger on it. Doesn't, I'm not really sure.
Right.
This is a different experience. And it's not advisors are some magic pill. Sometimes it's just helpful to have that
Yeah.
external guidance or recommendations to help you make the decisions.
Yeah, help you zoom out a little bit for sure. Are you leveraging Chat GPT for some of the zooming out, or like I had a lot of founders who are like, I use Chat GPT to bounce off ideas.
Huh. I mean, not at a strategic level, but maybe that's something I should check out.
Hmm.
Certainly on more tactical level. Hey, I need 10 ideas for marketing or building up a wait list for beta users for this product.
Hmm.
I, I use it for a lot of ideation stuff, and it comes up with things I already thought of, and it usually comes up with things I hadn't thought of. Some of which are stupid, and some of which are good. So it's I think it's really good for that.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not using it to its full potential, but it's at least helpful for what I use it for.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it depends on how you leverage it. And a lot of times it takes a few iterations. If I remember our conversation, some of the roles you were at startups were a direct result of you advising. Is that a good approach you'd recommend people who are from the industry taking if they want to transition into startups?
The short answer is yes. And it was less about being an advisor and more about trying to find, because when you're coming from, especially if you're coming from a large company or you're trying to switch industries, you talk to founders, they, it's not like they have the luxury of being able to say, sure, I'll just try it out and let's work together. And if it doesn't work out, we'll just part ways, because it's never that easy. And it's always you as the founder, like there's time on your side, on your part, to have to work with this person. And so if it's not going to be a right fit, or you're not really sure that they're going to be able to add value, like it's not as easy as just, oh, we'll just part ways and be fine. So if you're coming in and you're like, I want to break into these startups, it's important to try to figure out what you have to offer. Like, what's your value prop to those startups, and to those founders in particular? Like, what do you have to offer? And particularly if you're coming from a large company, like you can't, don't put it on the founder to try to make those connections and say, oh, you did this and this, that would make you good for this role here. Like, you need to do that for them, because it's not a simple connection. It's not, oh, you were an engineer at Google, but I'm hiring you to be an engineer at Facebook. I totally get it. Yeah, we code in the same languages. Fine. When you're making that jump to a startup, especially from a large company, it's a big leap. What I did was really try to figure out, like, what skills have I learned that are transferable to these smaller companies. And when I talk to the founders, like, there's a lot of founders just, yeah, we don't need that, or that doesn't make sense, or I don't get the match. But the ones who did, they got it because I said, listen, I've done this. I've sold these sorts of products to these companies. That seems similar to what you're doing here. So I think I could help do that. And they're willing at that point, they get it, right? Willing to work out some sort of consulting arrangement. And then it was less about being an advisor and more about how I'm adding value. And in a couple of cases, it worked out pretty well, because that's the try before you buy sort of thing.
Mhm.
Hey, if you're successful at selling these deals, we're looking for a new VP of sales to open an office for us. You're already here doing it. You've proved you could do it. So why don't you just stick around and do that. So that's actually an example from one company I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was on the marketing side where it was just, hey, come in and try it out. And then a month later, things were working out and it made more sense to stick around than try to find somebody else to replace me. And I was doing a really good job. So it was like, if I had come in and pitched cold, I think it would have been a stretch for the founder to say, I see how you could do this role. The fact that I came in and said, let me help you with a couple of these projects where I've done stuff like that before. It makes sense. We'll do it on a project basis and see where it goes. And as you're successful at it, it's a no-brainer for the founder to be like, "What? Please stick around."
Yeah. On the job, hiring is also easier for the founding team just to take that bigger risk because there's not a lot of cash to begin with to take that kind of full-time risk. So yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And so one of your roles, you helped set up a sales team for people out. The startup was trying to enter the US. You mentioned. What are some of the challenges that someone from outside US as a startup would face while setting up a company in US, and what are some of the recommendations you have?
Yeah. So I had known that founder for a couple years before I even started doing the commission-based sales for them, and which eventually led into a VP of sales role. So I think that's one challenge is that unless without that sort of personal connection or having built up some level of history, it's difficult to hire someone that you can trust when you're literally halfway across the world.
Mhm.
So, in our case, the founding team was in Israel, and so there was like 3 days a week where we could connect because of the weekends were off by a day, and then you have the massive time difference. Without that level of trust, like there's a lot that can happen in a few days, and if you don't have that level of trust, you're going to be worrying about, oh, well, what's going on over there? Are things going right? Is there anything I can do to help? And it's not like you can just drive into the office or hop on a plane and fly there and come back. Like it's a pretty big deal to go that far around the world. So I think if you're able to build up relationships or connections with people in this case in the US market at a time
Mhm.
before you need it, I would recommend doing that because it really is, it's more than just the skill set. There's just a level of trust that is just so much more important when it's a team of 10 versus a team of 10,000.
Yeah. And so was that expansion, what kind of company was that, and what were the challenges in setting up that expansion path?
Yeah, it was a mobile app, and our revenue model was selling native ads within our app. So
I remember you mentioned Facebook started attacking. That was an interesting story. You want to talk
yeah,
about that?
if Zuckerberg finally realized that in mobile ads, which was the kind of one of those questions that was always in the back of your mind when you're working in that space at that time is like, what is Facebook doing? There's all these ad networks out there. Like, why isn't Facebook doing this already? And eventually they did.
Hmm.
So that was a big pivot that the company had to make. Is our app was it was like a helper app for you. This is going way back when Android was very fragmented, right? So not every Android app would work on every Android device. It varied by
Yep.
device manufacturer and Android version. The initial version of our app would be to recommend only the ones that would work for your particular combination of OS and phone.
Mhm.
But then it morphed into kind of making very helpful recommendations based on, well, one, your hardware setup, but then also based on some personal preferences that it would learn about you or you would provide to it in exchange for some incentives. So we knew a lot about our users, and that was pretty valuable to advertisers. At that time, you could monetize. If you had a mobile app, you could monetize via ads. Typically, you just sign up for an ad network and you'd give them some basic information about, I need this source of users, and they would just start pumping ads your way. And a lot of them were garbage.
Hmm.
And the targeting was not that great because these ad networks only know so much about those users. So the ads were pretty cheap, but very low effectiveness. But because we knew so much about our users, those we could charge a lot higher rates for the ads because the targeting was so good, which made it make sense for us to have a direct sales model, because we could go to anyone who was, it ended up being a lot of like mobile games, but anyone who's trying to advertise to these mobile users and charge them a lot higher rates than they would have to pay for an ad network. But we typically do like a trial run with them to prove, here's why you're paying so much higher, because the results are so much better. You're getting the actual users that you want,
Yep.
the actual people that you want to reach with your message, as far as, instead of just spraying and praying and getting a bunch of garbage. And that worked, right? That's why we started building up the sales team to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then it got to the point, once Facebook got involved, Facebook knows probably more about people than anyone wants to realize that they know about people. So their ability to do targeting is really good.
Yep.
And once they created their own ad network, it made sense for our app. It's like, why are we selling direct when we should just be monetizing by signing up for Facebook's ad network? So we did a little bit of a pivot, shut down our direct sales team, closed the US office, and the founding team went back and changed up things with what the app was going to be doing, and ended up being acquired by Assurion, another a US company.
Yep.
And that's how that whole company went.
Yeah, the trial run that you did you get from paid pilots to a paid contract, or at that stage, given it was an ad network, it was a freemium service?
Yeah, we were just selling direct ad placements at that point. We'd sell a certain number of impressions or clicks. So my engagement, it was just commission-based sales. Go find people that want to advertise on our platform and sell them ad space.
And for the customer, was that you said there was a trial program, right?
Oh, for
Yeah,
them.
for
Yeah, usually because we're charging such higher rates. Of course, they want to get a better deal. So they'd look at ad networks. I'm paying 10 cents. You're charging me a dollar. Yeah, but we're 20 times better. So you're actually getting a better deal. And it typically would not be hard to say, okay, let's run a trial for 2 weeks, a paid trial.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you stuff for free, but a paid trial, and see how it goes. And then we'd show them the results, and pretty much every single time they'd be like, oh, I get it. Okay, let's keep doing this.
Yeah. A lot of early stage founders fall into this trap of paid versus free. Free pilots are very popular in Europe as well. What's your take on free versus paid? It's obvious, but I want to hear your.
I mean, paid's better than free always. I mean, I think it comes down to what do you need to do to get the customer to that point where like the light bulb goes off with them, where they're like, oh, I get it. This is why I need it. And this is the right product for me. With this mobile company I was talking about, they're already spending ad money. So for them to say, let's just spend the next 2 weeks, it's $1,000 and for this trial, and that's it. Like 2 weeks, we'll cut it off after $1,000 and we'll show you the results. Because we knew that's all it would take to get the results back, which would show them like, okay, like you're stupid for not using us, basically is what the results would say. With other SaaS products, it's this balance of, you want to get people onboarded, but you got to get them to that point where you don't want to strip away the functionality that might be important for having the eyes light up and be like, oh, this is why I need to keep paying for it. Yep. At that point, do you offer like a scaled down version that's free forever? Or do you have a limited time free but it's full featured? It depends. What is that magic feature, that magic moment that gets the customer to be like, this is why I need to keep paying for it. And if that is something that is, we're going through this with SmartPath as we're looking at our freemium model, because there's some things like there's value that we need to deliver to these parents. Otherwise, like, they're going to look at it and be like, why am I using this tool? This isn't any better than Google, or I could do this on ChatGPT. So there's things that we absolutely need to have. It's almost like we need to have the full feature set in here. So what is the limitation? Is it time-based, or is it like number of kids, or is there some other factor that gates where it goes from free to paid? Mm-hmm. But in that free version, like, we need to have that magic moment needs to happen. So we have to make sure we don't strip that part away.
Yeah.
So it's this balancing act, and we have ideas around what that is, but it just comes down to working with the customers and trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That aha moment has to happen within that stipulated time, else there's no conversion. And I
Mhm.
think you're spot on about messaging. So the messaging has to, first of all, show the value. If you don't get the messaging right, there is no free or unpaid pilot. But if the messaging is right, it's probably easier to convince them for a paid pilot because they're already seeing the value. And yeah, obviously, paid is definitely better than better than free.
Yeah. Some of it comes down to whether they're already paying for similar sort of functionality somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a
Like,
good
because
point.
then it's easier to convince them. If it's something incremental, hey, here's this new tool that you absolutely need. It's only $30 a month. It's like, yeah, but that's $30 more a month as opposed to you're paying for these other
Yeah,
tools. Ours is better and it's going to save you money. Okay, maybe I'll try it out and I'd be willing to pay for it because I know that if I like it, I can drop the other stuff. So sometimes some of those dynamics or some things need to take into account.
yeah, yeah. And so the last company was AppZen, the one we were talking about, or
Oh, the mobile company was Drippler.
Drippler. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I remember our conversation about AppZen, another
Mhm.
startup you had a stint with, on pivoting from being a competitor to a partner. That How did that happen from you being a competitor to someone to becoming a channel partner, and was it fruitful?
Um, so yes, and so the company started off. So before I joined, when I originally met the founders at 500 Startups, their company was basically a mobile expense reporting tool. So think like Expensify,
Hmm.
and highly competitive space was back then, still is
Yep.
today. And so when I reconnected with them a couple of years later, they were going through a pivot because what they discovered was one, yeah, it's highly competitive and probably not the best market to get into, but we consistently get this feedback from customers that, hey, I'm already using Concur, I'm already using some other tool, but you have this AI auditing on the back end that looks at all the receipts and does some really cool stuff that I really like. Is there a way I could just get that? And they heard that enough to the point where they said, maybe we should just pivot into being this B2B SaaS product for the back office and plug into these other tools like Concur and work with them. Back when they were an app, it was direct competitor to Concur.
Mhm.
So you had the sellers were call up somebody and they, who do you use for expense reporting? Oh, we use Concur. Oh, here's why you need to use AppZen. And the Concur salespeople would eventually hear about that and they'd hear some things that were maybe said that were negative about them. So there was not a real good relationship at that point when this, and I joined at this pivot. Like that's what convinced me to join. When the founder told me this pivot they were going through, I'm like, that's a genius idea. I don't know why this doesn't already exist. I want to be on board. So fast forward to when we get in there, now we're going to be this back office SaaS product. We need to plug into these other existing tools. The big play in the space was Concur. And to do that, like we need to be part of their app program. They have essentially an app store. And of course, applied and we're told, no, you guys are a competitor. So there was a lot of negativity there. So it just required some convincing of them like, hey, listen, this is what we're doing. We're actually sunsetting this old product that was the competitor. Totally get it. But here's what the new product is. And because it was just the app store, they were willing to take a chance with that and say, okay, we'll prove you to be in the app store. That's fine. But from there, like the more we looked at it, the more like we should have got seen because we knew Concur had large market share, but it certainly seemed 90+% of the companies that we'd be reaching out to try to sell AppZen into were Concur users. So pretty quickly became clear that maybe there's a channel opportunity here where there could be something bigger than just selling on the App Store,
Mhm.
particularly when we got to how do we convince the App Store team to promote us more. So we'd have to almost sell that app store team on here's why you need to include us in these different events that are coming up or in the next marketing emails that you go out. Or even better, are there sales incentives that maybe we can partner with you with partner with you on, where your Concur sellers are promoting us. So yeah, kind of a long story that led to where we ended up signing a reseller agreement with Concur. There's a lot in between that happened from being an app store to being a reseller, but that was the end result. But some interesting stories in how we got there, though.
What convinced them to agree?
Yeah. So once we got on the App Store, now we had a seamless technical connection. So when we talk to customers, they're like, we use Concur. And they're like, that's awesome. We work with Concur and integrate seamlessly. Oh, okay. So now it made the conversation with these customers a lot easier. And we already knew from the earlier conversations with customers that this functionality, this AI audit, was something that they really liked. It saved them a ton of time and a ton of money. We sold to more and more Concur customers, which started to get the attention of the Concur team beyond just the App Store team, particularly when we closed a couple of their top 5 global accounts that really got their attention. Like, how is this 10-person startup selling like some 7-figure deals into some of our top customers? And why are we only getting a 10% cut of that? As I think in the back of their mind, like, there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table here. Maybe we should do more with them. And that convinced them to have more discussions around what a broader partnership might look like.
Oh, so money is what motivated them.
Yeah. Yeah. It worked out great for AppZen in the early days. The ultimate goal for any company when you're working with their partner team is, I want your salespeople to be incentivized to sell my stuff. So once we had this reseller agreement, that was a big part of the negotiations, was like, we need to be part of your sales compensation tools. Like, how can you incentivize your salespeople to sell our stuff so we both make a lot of money?
Yeah.
And so that first year was a lot of them putting incentives in place and then us doing training and making sure everybody knew about, here's why every single deal and every single renewal you have, you should be adding AppZen on top of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it definitely adds to the renewal conversation. You're going in with additional value instead of saying just renew us. You're upselling basically. And so they are an incumbent. You move from being a competitor to a partner. Did at any point there were discussions around what if they just replicate us and push us out of the market? An obvious conversation that people might have.
Yeah, and there's always a thought, but then it comes down to, yet this big company, if they were going to do that, why haven't they done it already?
Yeah.
And isn't it easier just to create a partnership that starts create a partnership with someone who's already built this capability and start bringing in revenue quickly? In the long term, I think they did actually roll out a competitor in the subsequent years.
Okay.
It's just something you always keep in mind and look at the terms and conditions and reevaluate the partnership every year to make sure that it's still in your best interest. But at that time, I guess their biggest internal competitor was, they had a services offering for allowing a company to outsource their receipt audit to a SAP Concur team I think they had them around the world, Philippines, India, et cetera.
Yep.
Basically just people with really large screens, like looking at receipts all day and clicking approve, not approve, reject, which is all the stuff AI does really well. And that was the whole value prop, is that it's not really a competitor because it costs way more and is a lot slower. So is it really a competitor?
Yeah. To this date, there are a few companies that pull that hack where they would hire people and pretend it being AI driven.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, things definitely have changed a lot with LLMs. Just some closing thoughts. What does the next 6 months look like for SmartPath? And where can people sign up if they are thinking about homeschooling? And which geography is it available in?
Yeah. So it's available in the US, at least for the foreseeable future. That's where we'll stay.
Yep.
I know I keep getting inquiries about other countries, but we got a big enough market to tackle here. We got to figure this one out first. And you just go to smartpath.school is the URL, and all the information is there. As far as what's the next 6 months look like, We are actively fundraising, and we've also got some work on our marketplaces. So we've got a number of LOIs signed with curriculum providers. We've got a number of homeschool advisors and tutors who want to be onboarded onto our new marketplace. So certainly in the next 6 months, those will be live. Those should be live in January, at least in a beta aspect, and then we'll be ramping those up.
Well, exciting times. I wish you and the team all the very best for achieving that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on here. It's been fun.
Yeah, it was great having you, and thanks for taking the time.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.